All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into something incredibly chilling. We're going to dissect a terrifying myth from the village of Bairavpur, and what we'll find is a profound allegory about how outdated, tyrannical power manages to survive long past its expiration date. If you love unpacking stories where the supernatural directly mirrors human psychology, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to look at the anatomy of this curse piece by piece to understand how our own fear actually breathes life into the things that should be dead.
Listen to this. A king who dies in rage does not leave. He waits. Honestly, that one line, that is the absolute key to the psychological horror we are about to unpack today. It tells us right out of the gate that this isn't just your standard monster story. It is a story about the stubborn, lingering nature of fury and control. The entity we're looking at doesn't just haunt a physical space, it haunts the collective memory of a people, just waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike. Okay, let's jump into part 1, the village of Bairavpur. To really understand the curse, we first have to understand the deeply trapped, paranoid environment where it took root. Picture this village. It was a place entirely consumed by suffocation and dread. The second the sun went down, boom, every single door was bolted shut. Oil lamps were dimmed to the absolute lowest flicker. You literally did not step outside unless it was a matter of life and death, and even then, you were whispering prayers the whole time. And the source of all that dread? Well, he had no body. The villagers called him the Head King. Some people thought he was a betrayed ruler from centuries ago. Others believed he was just this shapeless nightmare that crawled out of an old well near a banyan tree. But the one completely terrifying detail that everyone agreed on was this. He was only a massive severed head. His crown was literally fused to his skull, like the ancient metal was melted straight into the bone.
That brings us to this fundamental question. So what was he, actually? I mean, think about it. How does an entity with no physical form to enact violence actually pose a threat? But the rumors alone were enough to lock down an entire village. So as we transition from these whispered myths to the very first horrifying physical encounter, we really start to see exactly how this thing operated. He didn't have hands to strike or legs to chase, which forces us to look at the psychological mechanisms he used to wage war on Bairavpur.
Right, let's move on to part 2, the Head King returns. Because, spoiler alert, his return wasn't a sudden physical massacre. It was purely calculated psychological torment.
The first sighting hits the nail right on the head. Imagine you're a farmer returning home late in the faint moonlight. First, you hear this sensory anchor, a slow, heavy, wet, rolling sound in the dust right behind you. You're probably thinking, okay, maybe it's just a fallen coconut. But then you hear this chilling accusation. Why did you take my land? The farmer spins around to see this massive head, eyes glowing faintly like hot coals, a filthy beard dragging in the dirt, and a jaw that unhinges unnaturally wide. That jump scare isn't an attack, it's an accusation. The farmer survived, sure, but his hair turned completely white, and he literally never spoke another word.
So let's look at how fast this escalated. Day 1 gives us the farmer's silent trauma. By week 1, the Head King isn't just knocking on doors. He's roaming around calling out different accusations into the night. Stuff like, you burned my palace, or you stole my throne. By month 1, the psychological toll turns physical, and 3 villagers disappear. What is absolutely crucial here is the mechanism of the curse itself. The moment someone looked into his glowing eyes for too long, they became completely obsessed. They'd start muttering about loyalty and betrayal to a dead king. He was infecting their minds.
Now, here's where it gets super interesting. An old temple priest pulls up some forgotten texts and basically nails exactly what this entity is. This isn't a hungry ghost. It is an entity fueled entirely by ego and forgotten dominance. It waits for its people to move on, simply so it can remind them of its existence. This is such a brilliant, allegorical deconstruction of absolute control, right? The Head King represents a tyrannical power structure that cannot stand the thought of being irrelevant. It uses guilt and historical grievance to drag the present backward.
Which leads us to part 3, rebuilding the monster. Because this psychological grip, it very quickly turns into a horrifying physical reality near that old well. Remember those 3 missing villagers from our timeline? Yeah, the stakes of this explainer just got very real. They actually found one of those missing people near the well. The body was completely intact, but the head was missing. The horrific realization suddenly hits the village elders. The Head King is literally using the bodies of his victims to reconstruct his own lost power. He's hijacking the physical agency of the people to build himself a brand new throne of flesh. Gross, right?
So obviously faced with this, the village grows desperate. They try chanting mantras, drawing fire circles, spreading holy ash across every single doorstep. They did everything right according to tradition. And for a week, it actually seemed to work. Things were quiet. But here is the tragic flaw in their logic. Traditional spiritual wards are entirely useless against a psychological curse rooted in fear and submission. You literally cannot ward off a toxic idea with holy ash.
And wow, does that realization hit hard during the climax. The storm arrives and the sensory overload is just total. The wind acts like a living thing, tearing off roofs and bursting windows. Over the thunder, the ultimate declaration echoes out, "I am still your king." But the most terrifying detail? The head king isn't dragging himself in the dirt anymore. He is hovering right above the square in the pouring rain, grinning with these rows of dark, broken teeth. And right behind him, smoke and shadow weave into veins, a neck, broad shoulders. He is terrifyingly close to being completely whole again.
So how do you fight that? Part 4, The Mirror's Truth. Just as the village is about to be totally consumed, a brave young woman named Mira steps up.
Mira had actually lost her brother to the head king, so she marches right out into this roaring storm, carrying the most unconventional weapon possible. She doesn't bring a sword, and she doesn't bring a torch. She brings a mirror from her own home. She shouts into the storm, demanding he look at what he has become. She forces him to confront reality, because while he perceives himself as this majestic ruler demanding his rightful obedience, the mirror's reality reveals the undeniable truth. He is just rot and fury. He's nothing but a severed relic, clinging to a power that simply doesn't exist anymore. Tyrannical power is brilliantly exposed here as a fragile illusion of decaying rust and bone, the exact second it is forced to actually look at itself.
The head king looks into the glass. The storm falters. His expression shifts from pure confusion to blind rage, and the mirror actually cracks. He roars, desperately trying to reclaim his dominance, shouting, "You are nothing without me!" But Mira doesn't even blink. She delivers the ultimate mechanism of defiance that finally breaks this psychological spell. She looks at him calmly and says, "You are nothing without our fear."
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, The Power of Fear. Because it turns out, the true power source was never the head king's magic or his history, it was just the villagers' fear.
The absolute second that fear is replaced by clear-eyed reality, the monster is physically destroyed by the shocking realization of his own utter irrelevance. Let's track this rapid collapse step by step. Step 1, the mirror cracks, but the truth is already out. Step 2, those terrifying smoky shoulders, built from the stolen lives of the villagers, they completely dissolve. Step 3, the fused crown, the big symbol of his divine right, begins to crumble, flaking into rust and ash. And finally, step 4, the head king screams. But not in anger this time. He screams in pure fear before his head drops from the sky, hitting the ground with a heavy thud as a lifeless, hollow husk.
By sunrise, the entity's just gone. There's only a scorched circle left in the square. Slowly, Bhairavpur heals. You start hearing laughter again, kids play near the banyan tree. But on those really quiet nights when the wind is low, some villagers swear they can still hear it, a slow, distant rolling. It's like this lingering auditory memory, right? A permanent warning that the ghosts of the past are always out there in the dark, just waiting for someone to be afraid of them again.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question to chew on today. What obsolete power do you keep alive through your own fear? This whole explainer, the story of Bhairavpur, it shows us that the monsters of our past, whether they're outdated institutions, toxic relationships, or just historical grievances, they literally only have the power we surrender to them. Hold up a mirror to the things that terrify you, and you might just find they are nothing but dust and echoes. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the shadows.